Oh, we're back fixing something a bit more heavy. This has actually been going on for a while because I haven't gotten around to finalizing it. But after we called it on the logging for this winter, I had noticed, as I was showed you in a previous video, that I've had quite a bit of play here in the mount for the harvester head. So it was quite easy to disassemble. There is a pin up here and that came out quite easily. I prepared a place to land the arm after it was undone, and as we started pulling it out it kind of fell down a little, so we had to start the machine and start lifting it, and I had to back up a little to get the brake disc for the swing dampener here to or swing damper. A dampener maybe is something that makes things wet. I always mess them up. And then there is for the other sideways damper, and here I wasn't really sure because there are some spacer on the parts diagram, so I was a little confused. Realized we had to get the packaged discs, applying the braking force out first, and then we could start looking at getting the pins out there held in place with a lock ring on each side that holds the pin in place. And even with that off, it needed a little bit of tapping, because here there is quite a bit of play and a bit damage. It's mainly in the ears. The pins themselves have very little wear, so I guess they have been replaced at some point. So here you can see, and it's mainly the ear that's oval, and here I can't really do anything about it. It would require welding on material and having it precision machined, or maybe machining away some material and adding a extra spacer ring there. But and here the bushings are quite worn and these can be replaced, so that's I'm going to do. I've also noted that it's been swinging the harvester head when I've been picking up speed here and there. Sometimes it's been a little uncontrolled, and they were like welded on there. Changed my focus to try and remove the bushings. I hoped I could just start hammering them and start falling in on themselves, but they started breaking, so that it didn't work. My dad ended up putting a saw blade in there and cutting it and getting them out. I wasn't around for that. As far as the brake, the nuts came undone, but then the plate did not want to move. We added some heat and the first one actually came undone, just holding it with a pair of pliers. That was a little bit lucky, so then we at least had something to work with. Now that we tried the second one, that one just refused to move. It started a tiny bit and then it was like it was welded. We moved it a little back and forth, cut open a slot in a square pipe and applied more force and tried more heat and more force and refused. We actually gave up on this for now, and my dad ended up getting it out by breaking the bolt. It snapped. Here I'm back, and the bushings had been on their way out, being removed, and I could start looking at the spring washers and cleaning things up, preparing for installing new bushings and some new brake pads. A small Dremel tool to clean up a few small damages in the bore where the bushing would sit. Then cleaned up the discs for the swing damper, and just had a tool to scrape away the build-up that was on them. Also noticed that the bearings in here, one of them was actually a little rough in some spots, but these are not really under any load as I understand it. So it felt overkill to start replacing them, and it was very small, so decided to open up the seals and add some more grease and see. Had they been old rusty in here, I would probably have been replacing them, but a dentist torture tool and a small screwdriver, and usually you can pick away and get the seal to pop out and then add some more grease. I do this all the time on the motorcycles, the wheel bearings on them. And I have yet to replace a wheel bearing that I have installed myself by doing this every other tire change. Because it's mainly that you get moisture in bearings that kills them. Cleaned up the spring washers here that are putting force on the discs, applying some dampening force for the swinging. A bit of rust have started to form, but I think they will survive longer. Add some grease to hold away the rust for a while. There is like a lock ring at the top here holding the disc, the stack in place, and then what you tighten up on the other side also has a disc in there, and there is a distance pin in between in the package. You put this together just to keep it together until it was time to assemble. Here you can see the spacer that I was worried. Wasn't sure really where it was at when taking things apart. Had been able to source some new bolts here, so the plates on the other section could be reused. I needed to clean up the threads some in some of the plates here because they were a little bit damaged. New bushings. This might be a tiny bit shorter than what was in there, but should be good enough. Wanted to push some fresh grease through and see that all the places that there are no blocks in any of the grease passages, and I had to hold my fingers over two of the holes to see more come out. On the other side, it required us to use some tools and kind of block off the other passages before we could push fresh grease through all of them. Here it's some special bushings. It only comes out lube at the bottom half where it's most required. Then the spring washers and fresh brake pads were installed loosely for now, because tightening them up now would make it harder to install it later on the machine. And then tightening things up a little, and then the lock nut on top. Cleaned up the top of the rotator and started installing the pins here, and here I have that play I can't really do anything about right now. I will use it a little more before addressing this, because it will require probably sending the top of this away and having it machined. And then the lock ring pliers I have here are a little on the small side, so it was a little tricky being able to get them to sit in the groove, but could eventually get them on there enough and then tap them a little to snap into place, and it's the same on the other side. Then in with the disc package at the bottom, and then the pin assembly that pushes them together with the spring washers. Here trying to get it to tighten up. For some reason the threads didn't really want to start. I'm not sure really why, but we brought out the electric tool to help out and put a little force together, and it started going in nice and easy. We tightened it up quite well so it wouldn't fall over on its side. And then it was sitting like this for a while because I had other things to do and so on. But the other day here, well, it was actually yesterday, we'll see, it might be the day before that, I'm not sure if I will have time to upload this today, if it will render fast enough. I had to back the machine back a little to get the tab that holds the upper brake disc in place, so it was just to swing it in and then use the extension a tiny bit. Then it needed some, it started going into the first bushing, the pin, and then it was some force required to kind of get the brake disc or the disc far enough in or far enough out towards the machine to allow the pin to go through the center of that. And then I saw that it was a little bit of sideways play, so we fitted a thin shim in here that I did my best to center, and then we started trying to get the pin all the way out. I had to move the machine a little bit, and eventually we could get it to go all the way through. And then it's just a matter of adding the washer that was on there and tightening up the nut with some Loctite. So hopefully there will be no play in the upper part. Brought out the machine and started swinging the harvester head a little and tightening up the brake parts a bit to a point where I started feeling some effect. I might have to adjust this more as later on when I start using the machine more. We'll see, we might clean up a few ugly trees a little later on as a test run this summer, but any real logging will not be until next autumn. And then I added the lock rings that are on there. I guess it's because if things come undone that you don't want loose parts, that they have lock rings there. And then I added some fresh grease to the joints that had been apart. I didn't even know that there were two grease points up here at the top pin, because one was so full of dirt. But now I know there are grease nipples on both sides, so I better grease them both every time I grease the machine to prolong the life of the new bushings. Some really nice spring days now. Maybe a little bit too cold for the wrenching part, but that's all.